Hi guys, today we start with Romanticism. We can say that Romanticism is a reaction against the faith in reason of the Augustan age and the alienation brought about by the Industrial Revolution. During the previous period, that is the Augustan age, that we are talking about more or less the first half of the 18th century, the Augustan age, that can also called period of enlightenment, Illuminismo, is the period where reason triumphs and there is a great faith, a great trust in the human reason. And it is just this great faith in reason that brought to the to the birth of the Industrial Revolution that was born just in England in the last decades of the 18th century. When new discoveries such as the steam engine, la macchina a vapore, were created to support the birth of the industrialization, there was a great optimism in human reason because they thought that industrialization would bring welfare for everyone, richness, and the production of every kind of goods, of products within reach. But in fact, the consequences of industrialization were mostly negative. When we talk about the three revolutions of during the Romantic period, the first one to which we refer is the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution had brought about a new technology, as I have told you, the steam engine, the inventions, sources of power, but the consequence of industrialization on people was the creation of the mushroom towns that were towns that were polluted, overcrowded, and were diseases, there was alienation of people and a low life expectancy. What does it mean? Mushroom towns, because they were born in a very short, in a very little time, because of the pressure of the industrialization and the need for workers in the cities, in the towns that were very close to the coal and iron mines. Coal because it was the fuel for steam power, for the production of steam. And iron because it was the main power material for the industry that had to be worked. And in these mushroom towns, the life conditions were very, very bad. People were very unhappy, and disease dominated, and also people got drunk to manage to face all the problems of their life. And also life expectancy was very low. We think that the life expectancy was a little more than 20 years. That is, people were expected to survive an average of 20, 23, 24 years. And of course, this percentage is influenced by the child death that was very high. In the industry, there was the exploitation of men, of women, of children. They had to work very long hours, even 14, 15 hours per day, even women and children. More Women and children were exploited more because they were paid less than men for the same amount of hours. And also the Industrial Revolution brought about the unemployment, because there were machines that could do what men did in the past. So as you can see, the consequences of the Industrial Revolution were devastating, and the dominating word was alienation of men. Men were very unhappy. And so the consequences of the Industrial Revolution on the intellectuals, and in particular the Romantic poets, was very important. The same for the French Revolution that exploded in 1789, and that was strongly supported by some Romantic poets, especially Wordsworth, Coleridge and Blake, who were enthusiastic about the values of the French Revolution and for freedom and equality. But there was a strong disappointment, because the French Revolution was followed by the period of terror, with the beheading of the aristocracy. And even that period was followed by the ascent of Napoleon in 1793, that would get very that would be a big a very authoritative person, and would try to extend his power all over Europe. He became a tyrant, un tiranno. Also, a great important, very important revolution was the American one. In 1776, the British colonies, the 13 British colonies of the East Coast of America, had proclaimed unilaterally their independence. And in 1783, the independence of the American colonies was acknowledged, was recognized also by the British. So the influence of these three revolutions, and in particular the first two ones on the intellectuals, on the Romantic poetry, was very strong, because the first two revolutions ended into a failure. They brought about unhappiness. The original values for which they had been created were denied in the end. That is why the Romantic poets realized that the triumph of reason and of human mind that had brought about the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution had been a failure. They had brought about unhappiness. That is why Romanticism opposed the faith in reason, and it is a period in which there was a supremacy of feelings and emotions. It isn't by chance if poetry, if Romanticism is characterized especially by poets. Not so many novels, not so much theater, but especially poetry. And it was a period in which there was also introspection, nostalgia, emotionalism. That is, there was a new stress on the inside of people, and not in the outside, not in the outer, in the external realism. There was a stress on the humble and everyday life. That is, an interest in countryside as a place where men's relationship with nature is still intact, as opposed to the industrial town. And these themes we especially find in Wordsworth, because he was very close to nature, and he thought that it was in humble life, in everyday life, in the countryside life, in the farmers, in the very simple people and things that and the landscapes that he could observe in the countryside, that the true values of life could be found. So there was a sort of an escape from the city, from the industrial town, from the mushroom towns, from the unhappiness brought about by the Industrial Revolution, from the exploitation of the workers. There was an escape. The countryside was seen as a shelter, as an escape from the unhappiness of the industrial town. And for the same reason for which Romanticism escaped all that was rational, all that characterized reason, there was a new interest for the Gothic, the ancient castles, the abbeys, the wild, the irrational, horrific. It is in this period that Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein was written, as you know. It is a very famous novel of that period, and it is characterized by a monster and by Gothic elements. And also in Wordsworth and Coleridge there was a great importance on imagination that of course could allow people to escape from reality, because it was through imagination that these poets find their balance, the right values, and can find happiness, especially Wordsworth. And another important value of this period that went back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau was the view that the child was purer than the adult, that the child has not been corrupted by civilization yet, and so is unspoiled by civilization. And we can find both in Wordsworth and Blake this difference between the child, and so the pure child, the true feelings, emotions triumph, and on the contrary, the adult that is corrupted by society and is also unhappy.